Welcome back to Finding the Beat, the podcast where we explore the deeper why behind the people making an impact in their fields and communities. I'm your host, Larry Moskowitz, and today we're joined by a very special guest, Dr. Stephanie Byerly. Dr. Byerly is a physician, leader, and advocate whose journey blends medicine, purpose, leadership, and personal growth in a really powerful way. Her story is one of dedication, resilience, and discovering how to lead with both strength and heart. In this episode, we talk about her path, what has shaped her along the way, and the mindset behind the work she does today. This is a conversation about purpose, passion, and what it really means to find your beat. Let's get into it. Nice to meet you.
Great to meet you as well.
And just by way of history, everyone in my family are physicians.
Okay.
Seems like when you have family members that are physicians, that you run to law school for some reason. And, and I think it's because we have the impression that doctors work so hard,
hmm
especially when I was growing up,
Yeah.
that to get to where you're at in life, and we're going to get into that in a minute, what it takes to become a physician. If the world only saw what you went through to get where you're
hmm
at today, it's so impressive. And
Thank you.
and what I did to, as a child, watching my dad, who was a trauma surgeon, orthopedic surgeon, who literally would sleep with one eye open, you know,
Yeah.
I remember days when we would be playing tennis where a guy would get run over by a boat and I'd be standing literally next to him, watching him sew up people and just, you know, nights and days and, making rounds on weekends and lo and behold, I became a my first 20 something years of my practice was personal injury. So I got to know a lot about medicine and actually, as a trial lawyer, had him on the stand, which was a very interesting
Ah.
time in my life where I actually was trying a case and my dad was my expert witness and had a roommate moving to a different story, but had a roommate that was a chiropractor. And I would literally bring my client to their office and then they would treat my client. And we just had a great couple of years there where it was just like one big family helping people. And it was a lot of fun. So tell me, did you always want to become a doctor?
I did. I was sick as a child and in the hospital a lot. And I think that what happened was I saw healthcare workers as these amazing, very noble people who were caring for people who needed help. And I grew up in a very unstable household and was very responsible for my mom by the time I was 9 years old. And so I think that I went into the caretaker role. And so I thought in my subconscious as a child, this is really the route I want to go because this is such a noble way to help people who are not cared for well. And, I want to be the person who gives them the security that I didn't have.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So was your father part of your life?
He was not. He left when I was two, and my mother was on her own, which it's kind of crazy to think back then and understanding back when, in that age range, she was taking care of my two sisters and women could not have credit cards without a cosigner back then, or couldn't get a loan for a house by themselves. So I don't even know how she did it. But she did it on her own, and I had to start working when I was 15 to pay her rent, and worked at a local restaurant that you probably know close to where you live.
And where was that?
It was in a McDonald's at the end of Sunrise
There
Boulevard.
you go.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is that they told me when I interviewed, I said I wanted to be a cook, and they said girls don't cook. And I said, really? And they said, you're going to have to be a cashier. And I said, well, you watch me. I'll be the first girl that is a chef or cook, I guess you would say, at McDonald's, and I became the first female cook at that McDonald's.
Okay, wait a second. Let's stop here for a minute. You're being raised by a single mother back in the day where, I mean, how many female doctors were running around? I mean, today it's commonplace, but when I was younger, I don't recall. By the way, I have a female doctor as my internist.
Good
We'll
for
get to
you.
that in a minute. Okay, so don't shame me yet. Okay, but let's just
No
talk about
shame.
his. Just talk about history. So you're a young child, want to become a doctor. You're working at McDonald's, and they're telling you you can't even be a cook,
Yeah.
and you're watching your mom struggle as a single
Hmm.
mother who can't even own a credit card.
Yeah.
So how is that all shaping in your mind?
Well, I think that's really what started me on the journey of I won't say feminism per se, but always was a fierce advocate for women. And I never really though understood that women and men were looked at differently as far as gender bias and things because where I trained, there was I never even felt that ever. It was when I came to Texas, which is different kind of place,
I have
and
a
I started
Texas
mm,
license.
it takes
I'm a
you
licensed lawyer in Texas.
Texas, and it's I was in a at the university and in a very I would say stressful environment. I went there to do neuroanesthesiology because I did a subspecialty in neurosurgery and was working with some of the most famous neurosurgeons in the world, and people were flying in from all over, and it was a stressful environment. That was the when I started really understanding the differences and how women physicians were looked at and treated. And so I started going on my journey along with healing from my trauma after my divorce. Really started noticing, okay, I understand what's going on now, and started on this journey of supporting women in different ways as far as taking care of them. So I also specialize in obstetrical anesthesia, so take care of women during labor and delivery.
Wow.
And yeah, and so went on that journey of healing from trauma, helping women, and then really combining the two. So combining my trauma-informed coaching, my coaching for women, all the things that I do as far as feminist coaching and leadership coaching and life coaching.
We're going to get to all that.
Okay.
Let's bridge the gap
Yeah.
here.
Yes.
So do you think that growing up with a single mother had that influence on you,
Hmm.
or was it landing in Texas without cowboy boots? What or was it always there and then it just sort of okay, here we go. Now it's time to, I've got all this history behind me. Now I've got my medicine behind me. Now I want to add this into my portfolio of who I am, or what happened? Basically, what
So,
happened? If
yeah, so I would say it was always there. And through college, through medical school, always doing things, fundraising for women, kind of volunteering in women's organizations. So that combined with seeing my mother and how hard she was working, I would say my mother, I really gained a great work ethic. And so when I made the decision, I'm going to do this, I'm going to become a physician. My life is not going to look anything like my, childhood looked. If I have a family, my kid's life isn't going to look that way. So I really was striving to have this facade that I think many physicians do. And so, again, in medical school, staunchly, fiercely, for women, I did things that probably I was one of these, let's just say this, I was one of these people who was always like, you're a lot, like your personality is really big and you're too much and all this. But I was gung ho, I had my mission. And then when I got divorced and I really started understanding, because I was always fiercely independent and realized I will never not be independent financially after seeing what my mother had gone through. And so after getting divorced and really stepping into that role, now I have two daughters that I'm primarily responsible for. I'm the head of the household here, And I really started understanding the impact of what that meant. So I think all of that combined with everything else, it really fell into place. Like, okay, I understand what's happening to women now. That was 20 years ago, even a little bit more than that. And so it wasn't even as big of a movement as it is now, in a way that we're looking at things like for women now. So it was started building and building and building and building and just really took momentum in the last 15 years, I would say.
So let's take a right-hand turn here.
Eh.
What do you think that's going on in Capitol Hill right now with this explosion of what's going on with the recent, the gentleman that was running for governor of California, that all of a sudden these revelations are coming out that he was basically we won't call him a pedophile, but basically an abuser of women.
Mhm.
And now we've got a movement that's now touched Washington, and we've got, we had Hollywood, the Me movement in Hollywood,
Mhm. Mhm.
and we've got Diddy going on, and uh, and then we've got the Epstein case, which I
Yeah.
know the lawyers involved in that. I had a touch of that. Sort of like this is like 2026, and now it's still going on.
It is. It is really sad, I will say, disturbing. I was a victim of sexual abuse by my mother's third husband, uncles, and it is rampant. And so I am actually in a group, a mastermind group with women that are very high achieving women, conquered, achieved. We have very deep conversations, and every one of them was sexually abused by either a father, a biological father, a grandfather. And so when we realize how rampant it is and that women have been very much silenced, and it's just sort of been, okay, well, this just happens to us. There's a reckoning coming. And I can tell you that there is a big movement for women to step back into power because we've really silenced our voices a lot. Not all women, but we've learned who we have to be to continue to be successful in our lives, the labels that we've all had to absorb, be smart but not too smart, be attractive but not too attractive, be this but not too much this. So now that this is all happening, women are, we've had it. We've had enough.
It's funny. I've been practicing law for 35 years, and what I've noticed when I first started, um, and there were women that were entering into the trial litigation,
Mm.
they seemed to be overcompensating and were very aggressive. It seems that they're now falling back into their comfort zone. I don't feel that that is still happening. The attorneys, the female attorneys that I now work with now, maybe because they're more experienced,
Mhm.
I don't know, but it doesn't seem like it is so prevalent anymore where they can be themselves and they're not overly aggressive. It's just my own personal opinion. It's a nice thing, that I feel that that has changed a little bit. Let me ask you, when you decided to be an anesthesiologist versus maybe a neurosurgeon,
Mhm.
do you think, you know, being a female had anything to involving that? What made you decide that you would be in a medical subcategory, specialty that didn't involve maybe more of a physical type of um, profession? My next door neighbor was one of 50 female colon rectal surgeons
Mhm. Mhm.
at Cleveland Clinic, and she was so proud of that. And by the way, she did my colonoscopy, but I don't see that distinction anymore where there's a difference between a female or a male when it comes to the type of doctor, you know.
Mhm. I actually wanted to be a trauma surgeon, and I don't know if you remember, it's been a long time. There was a very famous surgeon in Houston, Dr. Red Duke, and when I was a medical student, I was called him and said, I want to be a trauma surgeon. Can I come spend time with you? And I flew to Houston and I did that. And I was like, I don't want to be a trauma surgeon. There's no way. There's
Right.
no way.
So that
So
had
then I
nothing
wanted
to
to
do
do,
with you
yeah,
being a
yeah,
female.
I know. And then I wanted to do OBGYN. And when I was doing OBGYN time as a medical student, I was more interested in the anesthesia across the curtain. And so that's what I ended up trying and really loving. And it's kind of ironic that I do obstetrical anesthesia. So it was almost a full circle. I would say I know in my next lifetime, if I become a physician again, I would be a gynecologic oncology surgeon for women.
Mm,
Um,
that's got to
and
be a
it
tough
really,
job.
yeah, it's interesting because, there is still, or there are so many discriminations for women physicians. And I won't start that list because it goes on and forever. And women surgeons, even in a lot of ways, are judged even more harshly because if they're in the operating room and they speak in a different tone of voice or say something, they're going to be judged very differently than a male surgeon who would be doing the same exact thing, but it's acceptable for a male to respond and act that way, but it is not acceptable for a woman physician. So we have all of these additional barriers on top of us that we know that we are looked at differently than everybody else. And if I send an email, every word is going to be judged differently than when a male physician sends an email and has conversation. So there's still a lot there that is still prevalent.
So at one point or at some point, you decided I am going to start being more in a
Mm-hmm.
leadership role that is different from my medical role in regard to female issues. And I want to get into that aspect of your life. When did you start becoming more involved in that aspect of your life? And what are you doing today regarding that portion of your life? And how
Yeah.
much are you devoting towards that? So,
So I, in my leadership roles where I was at the university, got a large role in the American Society of Anesthesiologists. I became the chair of the Committee on Women Anesthesiologists and wrote several papers that have been published on physician burnout for women and many issues involving women physicians. And I have a daughter who has an addiction, and during her recovery, they told me that I needed to do my own trauma work. Well, when I did that, I started realizing there was a lot of trauma of being a woman as well, along with all the other trauma. So I thought, you know what? I need to help women in a different way. And I love what I do in anesthesia, but I need to do something else. And so I became a coach. And that's when I really combined all the different types of coaching that I learned with all of my life experiences. And I started my business back in 2021, and it was to help women physicians initially with burnout, and then it has morphed into what my niche is now for women physicians, more than women physicians, basically all high achieving women who are walking around numb and with a mask of perfection on their face to help them become unnumb and become the version of themselves that they really set out to do.
and how do you go about that? Do
So
they
I have
class or do you
um,
lecture?
I do it all. I do a lot of keynote speaking, and I have a coaching program called the Unnumb Method, which is I do one-on-one and group coaching. And it's a sequence of taking people through life coaching and understanding how their brain is working and how you can really start to plan your results intentionally when you understand how your brain works. And we look at, have you had trauma? But we don't excavate your trauma. We just say, hey, this is how it's affecting you now, and then really how do you want to go forward, and looking at a special type of coaching I do called women-centered coaching, which is women, in my opinion, have to have this type of coaching to understand all of the barriers we face, and putting it all together with the secret sauce and having women who start out, they come to me, they're these women that are so successful and they say, gosh, I don't have any confidence, or, I'm lost. It's usually I'm lost. I'm very disconnected. I conquered and achieved, and how did this happen? This isn't what I planned. And but after usually 2 months, it really starts to take momentum, and they're like, "Oh, I started a podcast today, and I applied for this new job today, and I know how to deal with this narcissist in my life now because you've explained all this to me." And so it is remarkable to see these women become unstoppable and unleashed.
You don't think men have those same problems? And if you
Uh,
do, what differentiates the woman from the man?
how long do you have to talk? So,
Oh,
it's
oh,
a big
we have
difference.
enough that someone's going to get this podcast
Okay,
and want to contact you, I'm sure.
okay, okay. So men are in an existential crisis now because they're not really given the space that women are. It's acceptable for women to do self-development work and, all the things kind of that we're doing, coaching, therapy, all the things. For men, they've always been told, not all men, but most, you're not supposed to have feelings, just, suck it up. You're the provider, keep going. So there's issues there, but they don't face, in general, the gender bias issues that women face. So if you look at salaries, they don't make less because they're a man. I make less
That,
because I'm
that,
a woman.
that's for sure. I think that's well documented. That's
Yes.
factual.
I was on the largest study for anesthesiologists, and we corrected for every possible thing you can think of. And female anesthesiologists made on average $35,000 less than male anesthesiologists. I get called by my first name often. I had a nurse ask me, "Can I call you Stephanie?" And I said, "Do you call the male physicians by their first name?" And she just looked at me. I have comments made about my body all the time. You're the best looking anesthesiologist I have ever seen, with patients' wives sitting right next to them. I get called a nurse constantly, which, not to, say anything negative about nurses. So when I make less, I get promoted less to leadership roles, any leadership role, but especially in academic medicine, promoted less to professor. Usually you get positions like assistant dean and not deans. Sexual harassment, the incidence is the same as it was back in the 1980s when there wasn't very many women physicians. I get asked to do things that a male physician would say absolutely not, but I will be judged differently. I will be the, you know,
The
if I
biatch,
say no. Right.
right? You're
If
the
I say
biatch.
no. And additionally, I'm not in a primary care specialty, obviously, but my clients explain to me that the women in the office who run the office will come to them and say, "Hey, can you just see this extra patient or do this?" And they say, "No, I can't." And they're judged differently. And so there's a power penalty where, as a woman, when you step into a leadership role, you're automatically judged more harshly by men and women. There's a likability clause, the same. You're automatically disliked when you step into this role. So it's really understanding that there's so much subconscious programming for others. And we also know we're being judged differently. And so it creates this inner war where we know that we want to be effective, we want to have impact, whatever that is, but we also know the box we have to live in and how far we can maneuver in that box. And little girls know by the time they're 9 years old the box they have to live in. They know, okay, I'm going to raise my hand, but this little boy's going to get called on more than me. And don't talk so much, be a good little girl, be quiet, don't have a lot of needs. So just think about that. If by the time you're 9, subconsciously you know the box that you have to live in, and then all of these external things, especially now with social media and all the things that you and I would never see 24/7, back 25 years ago, it is a huge burden. And it really is keeping women trapped and stuck and disconnected from themselves. And so
Do you
it's
feel
create.
that the administration of the places that you work at, the hospitals, do you still work in a hospital?
I do. Yes.
Do you feel like, wow, be careful with this one. She's a she's a troublemaker. Because I've represented some doctors in my
hmm
career that have
hmm
sort of the personality that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And they are definitely on the fringes of when they make a right turn when they should have made maybe a left turn. The administration is looking. I was just curious. I know it's a little off topic,
Yeah,
but I was just curious to see how your perception is on what um, the management or the administration of where you work treats you because of your outspokenness and the way that you have decided to dedicate, let's say, part, if not a good portion of your career to advocate for women.
I will say I'm in my current job. I haven't seen any of that. Certainly back in my university, 25 years, I always stood out as, somebody who was outspoken and especially as a woman. And yes, did I suffer the consequences of that? Absolutely. I
Hmm.
did. And I had to really start to learn what battles was I going to pick and how I was going to approach it. And so women have to understand the waters they're swimming in. And although we want to go in and conquer and do all the things, the other piece is that we also know how much of myself can I actually let out. How do I, when I go into a situation, I'm constantly scanning who's in the room, how much of myself can I get out? How am I going to be judged if I am just as passionate as a man is about a situation?
It seems to
And it's a
me that,
lot.
yeah, it seems to me that a lot of the tools that you can teach women also are applicable to men. Have you ever had
Yes.
men
Yes.
approach you and say,
Yes.
I know what your focus is, Doc, but I think you could also help me.
Hmm. Absolutely. And my one of the things that I would say a goal that I'm working towards is I want to go into corporations. Now I'm moving into all high achieving women, so not just physicians, and sit in a room with leaders and explain to them patriarchal conditioning and what that means. Because I've had many men who have spoken over me in a meeting or repeated what I said for an idea, and I will speak up and I will say, Jim, thank you for just repeating what I just said.
Mm.
I'm really glad that you're supporting me in this way with my idea. And they don't even know they're doing it. And when they realize they're doing it, they say to me, "Oh my gosh, I have a wife, I have a daughter, I have a sister. Is this what happens?" And I'm like, "Yes, this is exactly what happens." And then it's like, "Oh my gosh." So it's m men and women understanding the waters we swim in, the way you were socialized as a man, vice versa. I was
I'll tell you, I
socialized as a
have two
woman.
grown daughters, and I was brought up in a very male environment
Mm-hmm.
from a
Mm-hmm.
Coney Island, Brooklyn, Staten Island background.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could use some coaching,
Yeah.
doctor.
Here's the thing again, it is usually unconscious. And that's the piece about partnering with men, and we're not bashing the patriarchy and all the things. So it's really to understand and then say to men in leadership, this is what's happening with the women that are in leadership, and vice versa, so that they understand now from a different perspective, wow, like I'm judging her automatically differently, and I don't even know that it's happening. So it's understanding, having people work together, coaching women, coaching men, because as you said, men start to realize a lot in their lives too. And when they're given safe spaces to actually understand what's happening with them, it shifts everything. So we all need coaching. Everybody needs a coach.
Sure.
And this specific women-centered coaching, it is applicable to men and women, and that's the magic of it, and the other types of coaching. And also when people understand their trauma. We've all had trauma, all of us, and we don't understand that it lives in our nervous system. And so it affects every conversation, every action, every decision we make. And most of us don't even know that that's running the show as well.
Do you have any background in psychology?
No, I don't, but I have a trauma-informed coaching certification. So I wanted to go back into that because I had had so much trauma. And when I realized how it was literally ruling my life, that was another piece. And when I got a hold of that, Everything shifted.
Gotcha. What is your favorite part of anesthesiology?
Mm. I love going into a room when a woman is in labor and in so much pain, and I can put in an epidural, and all of a sudden it's funny. I put it in, I go do my paperwork, I come back because it takes about 15 minutes, and they're texting, and I'm like, yes, this is awesome, you know. So making that a wonderful experience for them, in that way, because we put people to sleep mostly, right? So we don't get to see often the results of what we do. Take people to the recovery room, they're doing great. But when you can actually see a patient who's awake and going from being in excruciating pain to, I can enjoy this experience. It doesn't have to be, where feel like I'm going to die here. So that's a wonderful thing to be able to provide.
Plus, I've heard like I actually worked in a hospital when I was in high school, and the only time you ever want to be in a hospital is when you're having children, right? I mean, let's face it,
Yeah.
the only joyous part of being in a hospital, right? Having children
A lot of
as a
people
patient.
choose to have certain surgeries sometimes, but yes, in general, I mean, the hospital is a really, it's a difficult place. It's a difficult place. It's a hard place to be. You see a lot of things.
So, if someone wanted to reach out to engage you and speak to you and learn about, some of the things that you offer, how would they be able to find you?
My website, stephaniebyerly.com, has a place for what I call a breakthrough call, kind of like discovering about that person, whether I can help them in any way. All of my social is at Stephanie Byerly, MD, and that is for Instagram and then Facebook and LinkedIn.
Awesome. So, I do this at the end of every podcast, and this is a unique situation. I went to a Christmas party and we exchanged gifts, and I thought this was kind of a like a regift, and someone gave me this, and I was like, ah, and and what I've been doing is I randomly pick these cards, and they're questions that you ask someone, and I've been asking questions, but I'm hoping, um, one of the questions because I looked at it before. It was one of the questions. I'm hoping if I ask this question, I hope that your mom's still alive. Is your mom still alive?
No, she passed away
Oh,
about
okay.
five
So I'm
years
not going
ago.
to ask that question.
Okay.
It was something about how often or do you speak to your parents? Both of my parents are deceased, but let me go
Mm.
ahead and ask, does Facebook make you feel better or worse about yourself?
I will say the only reason I go on social media is for my business. So prior to opening my business, I never even had Facebook, Instagram. I don't get caught up in comparison. I go on there to engage with platforms that will help me, that I can learn from or that I could add to. And so I don't get caught up in that comparison issue. And I'll tell you what, a lot of my clients, one of their assignments is to stay off social media for a week and see how their life changes. So my
Amen
thoughts
to
on
that.
social media, yeah,
Amen to that.
it definitely has a place and wonderful things, but if you get caught up in it, it can be very destructive.
Here's a little softer one. Are you city or country?
Both, because I love to shop and go have great dinners and go do things. Dallas is a great place for that, but I also love to go to the lake and get on a boat and just float all day. So I think I'm a little bit of each.
Last question. I think I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna give it a shot anyway. Do you do a good job seizing the day?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I love it.
I
I wake up every
I would
day.
have.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
have these new sites where you can bet on the future or whatever it is. I would have put
Hmm.
all my money on that one for you.
Thank you. Yes, I look when I wake up, I say, what adventures will I be facing today?
So where are you in Texas exactly?
I live in Plano, Texas, which is right by Dallas, and I work in Grapevine, which is just about 30 minutes from where I live.
And some of the people that may want to reach out to you, do you do live coaching as well?
I do a lot in person and I do virtual, yes. And I also do workshops, keynote speaking virtually and in person as well. I love getting in front of people and talking. It's my thing.
So do you have any time just to chill out?
I do. Actually was in Orlando this weekend at a retreat for
Oh,
women physicians and had a great time just relaxing and yes, and I do make some time every day for myself. Looking forward to some time in Maine this summer and so having some time away. So it'll be great.
fantastic. Well, it was such a pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much
Mhm.
for coming on, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Yes, me too. Thank you. It was
And
awesome.
Dr. Stephanie Byerly, thank you so much for joining us on Finding the Beat. Your story, insight, and perspective made this such a meaningful conversation, and we're so grateful you took the time to share your journey with us. To everyone listening, thank you for tuning in. We hope this episode inspired you to reflect on your own path, your purpose, and what drives you forward. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay connected for more conversations with incredible guests who each are finding their own beat. We Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay connected for more conversations with incredible guests who are each finding their own beat. We'll see you next time on Finding the Beat.